America's veterans are among the most admired and respected members of society, and yet far too often they're overlooked by their own government. Today we speak with Ballard Partners' Jeff Miller, a 16-year member of Congress and the former chair of the House Veteran Affairs Committee, about how to change the way America treats those men and women who are willing to sacrifice it all for the good of others. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
So, Jeff, great to have you on the show. Obviously, we have a new president with a new team. They are pledged to one big idea called change across the board. So let's start with the military. What is your assessment of the state of the military today in terms of our preparedness and our ability to do well in a much more complex and some would argue dangerous world?
Well, we still have the upper hand on capabilities with our warfighters. Unfortunately, we've allowed places like China to sneak up on us with some of the assets that they have. But even if their airplanes are equal to ours, or in some cases even better, our pilots are superior. And I think America still has that will and that drive, even in the Department of Defense today, that unfortunately has been taken down a road that, people used to say the military is supposed to break things and kill people. And that may not be an appropriate way to describe them anymore, but lethality is the word of the day. I mean, to be prepared to do what needs to be done should we have to go and defend this country or our allies.
And I think that's becoming more potentially real than ever before. We have China that's nipping at our heels. We have recalcitrant leader of Russia who is still rattling the saber, as they say. And what we're hearing, though, in the confirmation hearings, and certainly from members of the new administration, is they mean business about taking a look at everything, including in the military, to make us more fit, more ready than ever before, but to also hopefully not waste as much resource as we tend to do in that direction.
Well, the Department of Defense is an expensive agency to run. You can't cut corners with DOD and be prepared 24/7. You have to be ready when the time comes, and you never know when that may be. You may have an ally that gets attacked as they invoke Article 5, and to go in and protect our own American folks is not cheap. However, I think the industrial base realizes that we can't sustain some of the costs that we're incurring these days, but the big focus now is to, change back to a force that is lethal, a force that folks don't want to mess with, and stop the social experimentation. That's not what the Department of Defense is for. Those of us that served on the Armed Services Committee watched our military grow in strength. We've seen it used in countries around the world in a positive way. But it's time to get back, as President Trump says, to winning the wars that we're involved in too, not just being a part of them and holding ground. I think the important thing is that our men and women know that the American people have their back, the Commander-in-Chief has their back, and they're going to be ready at a moment's notice to answer the call.
Well, let's talk about having their back. So for 3 terms, you served as chair of the House Veteran Affairs Committee. More than ever, I think questions are being asked about, are we doing enough for those men and women who are willing to give it all, to literally risk their lives for our own security?
Yeah, a veteran is a veteran, whether they were in combat or not. They were willing to go, again, at a moment's notice, and as you said, risk their life in defense of the things that this country stands for. I mean, just think about the reverence of the American flag that a military member of today has, and it's a symbol that we've rallied around, for a long time. And, when you start talking about the Department of Veterans Affairs, that agency is continuing to grow. Its budget, when I came to Congress in 2001, was $55 billion. Now the budget is approaching $400 billion.
Wow.
In a relatively short period of time. Now, not all of that is health care. A lot of it is benefits, but you'll see a distinct change in the department under the Trump administration. One of the things that President Trump really believes is the veterans should have the choice to go outside of the department if they need to, have the choice to go into the VA healthcare system if they need to. But there's going to be a real fight on their hands because the unions have a lot of control at the VA. There's probably 250,000 union members at the VA, very few political appointees. So most of them are career federal servants. And it's very, very difficult to change. Someone said one time it's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier in a bathtub. I mean, it's very difficult to do it. But I think the folks at the department really understands that the president knows there will always be a Department of Veterans Affairs. And what the desire is to supplement the health care. If they can't get it inside, let the veteran go outside so they don't have to wait, not supplant it, which is what you hear a lot of time from the Democrats on the Hill while you're trying to, disband the VA and take every hospital down brick by brick.
Right.
When I was chairman of the committee, we had a hospital that was built that we screamed and yelled at the agency for almost 5 years that they were not going to build it for what they had it under contract for. It ended up costing $1.7 billion, one single hospital.
Wow.
And it's a premier facility. I mean, no question. I mean, anybody would be proud to have that in their district. But there's 174 hospitals now. You can't spend that kind of money on the hospitals. And so we have to use the community. Pensacola, Florida, the major city in the congressional district that I represented, we have 3 major hospitals there. Those hospitals can take care of the veteran population, even though there are those that think they need a hospital. We need to make sure that the care doesn't just go into concrete and bricks, that it goes into the actual care of the veteran.
Well, when you served on that committee, you served with your ideological non-soulmate, Bernie Sanders. You kind of rode together on a lot of issues that led, I think, to the landmark Access, Choice, and Accountability Act. How important is that act? And what led to kind of the unity of you and Bernie Sanders and others on that committee and lining up behind something where you found common purpose?
Well, it's really interesting because I served with Senator Sanders at that time when he was still in the House, but I didn't know a whole lot about him other than, you have a caricature in your mind, and I'm sure they do of me. And we had an issue arise in Phoenix, Arizona, where there were wait times. Actually, they were keeping 2 lists. So it didn't appear that there was a wait time, but they actually were putting some lists in cabinet drawers and keeping them away from the veterans. And the veterans were trying desperately to get health care in a timely fashion. And the thing that really frustrated most people is they had the 2 lists because their bonuses were based on whether or not the veterans were receiving health care in a timely fashion.
There was no wait.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
Yes.
Everything's good.
Right.
I get a bonus.
Right.
And that's just not right. And it became really a national issue. And so Bernie and I sat down and we said, look, we got to fix this. I mean, somehow. Now, I wanted it to be permanent. Bernie wanted it to have a sunset. So we ended up agreeing. I wanted the sunset to be when the money ran out. I knew that the money would never run out. It would keep being replenished. He put a date in, but it was actually the foundational law that ultimately, when President Trump became president, became the Mission Act, which is now, the law of the land. The problem is, in the last few years of the Biden administration, they had expanded a lot of the presumptive needs of veterans that were exposed to toxic exposure, and I get it. Things like that need to be done, but they didn't prepare for the cost increase that was going to take place, and all of a sudden they were out of budget, way out of budget, and they started blaming it on community care, and community care was not what was blowing their budget. This time around, I know some of the people that are going to be involved in budgeting at the VA, and they're going to look carefully at every dollar because it's not a matter of just cutting the spending. It's making sure that the veteran is actually receiving the benefit or the care.
Right.
And it's not about the bureaucracy. It's about the veteran. Again, as you said, those that were willing to put on the uniform of this country, go to foreign soil, risk their life, and this country, has done that since its inception.
You just referenced bureaucracy. Clearly, President Trump wants to take a close look, not just in terms of the Veterans Department, but all departments, at bureaucracy, some of which is really there to kind of gum up the works, one would argue, that we can't make fast enough progress on a number of critical fronts because the word bureaucrat always seems to stand in the way. They have a certain way of doing things, certain way of thinking about things. How important is it to this particular department that this president and his team were successful? And with Doug Collins coming in as the head of that department, how important is it that bureaucracy gets the message that we have to change the way we do business?
President Trump tried it in the first administration, and a lot of those were overturned in the courts. Some of them were reversed. I think the president will look again. There probably will be another run at the Accountability Act to tighten it up. It's not about taking retribution on a person that is serving in a particular agency. It's just about making sure that those in that agency understand that it's not just a job. I mean, it's easy to say that when you work for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm taking care of veterans and I'm doing everything I can. But are you really? And I think there will be a strong laser focus by President Trump and his administration, including Doug Collins and Paul Lawrence, who's been nominated to be the deputy secretary, and to make sure, number one, that the person they're supposed to be serving gets taken care of, and at the same time, dollars aren't being wasted. Nothing is more aggravating to somebody in the political world like I was to see this just rush at the end of a fiscal year to spend all the money
that you've been appropriated.
Yes. Because the fear is if I don't spend it all next year, I won't get an increase. I think, it's just ingrained in those that are in charge of counting the beans that if I want more next year, I got to show them that I really needed. And you find out that it gets spent on just the dumbest stuff. Really, that money should go back into the federal treasury to help in the reduction of the deficit. There is going to be a time when folks are going to say, we have no more way that we can tax those that make more to make them pay their fair share. Now what are we going to do?
Was it frustrating when you were serving on the Veterans Affairs Committee, seeing the waste and inefficiency, feeling in a way that you and everyone, despite your best efforts, that somehow we were letting our veterans down?
Each budget cycle, when the military construction and VA bill is passed, the measure of success among many in that space was how much of an increase did we get in the budget? And that's no way to measure success. Success is, how about the wait times? How about benefits and how long it took veterans to get their benefits? I mean, you have people that fight almost their entire last years of their lives trying to get benefits that they earned, not that they're owed. And so I think getting away from measuring success by a dollar, you need to look at numbers. And the thing that always bothered me about the department is I never trusted the numbers. Everybody's got to be transparent. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, independent. This government needs to get back to serving the people, not just serving the bureaucrats. I've had a chance to sit and listen to stories from World War II veterans, Korea, Vietnam, all of the areas that we've had people in conflict, men and women. And, their stories are different, but they're the same. You look at any World War II vet, and they'll tell you, when you jumped in a foxhole, it didn't matter what party you were part of. It didn't matter how much money you had. You were getting in there with your buddy to make sure that you were safe. I even had the honor of, attending the funeral of the last living World War I veteran.
Wow.
I did not choose to serve in 1977. I came out of high school then. I decided I was going to go in law enforcement, so I became a deputy sheriff and did not go into the military. I say it all the time. It probably was a mistake not to go serve, especially after having the opportunity to meet so many unique individuals.
Well, I think the measure of strength for any nation is its ability to show conscience and a heart to everyone in that country. And I think, our military and the importance of our military speaks for itself. What doesn't get addressed enough, in my opinion, is what happens when the days of battle are behind them, right, so to speak. And we owe them not just a debt of gratitude. We owe them our wholehearted support. And I think when we are able and willing to fully show that I think reflects well, Jeff, on all of us.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. Those that are willing, and it's a very small percentage because we have an all-volunteer military, those that choose to do that, for whatever reason, are owed a debt by this country and each one of us. And it's not just the taxpayers' dollars in our own local community. We need to make sure that they're okay, that they know we care, and we're not just stepping over them as they're sleeping in a sleeping bag somewhere on a cold night.
May this new administration, may men and women on both sides of the aisle, every side of the aisle, unite in common purpose as you did once with Bernie Sanders, because the mission is clear, the need is extreme, and the nobility of doing this for those who are willing to do so much for us kind of speaks for itself.
Yes, it does.
Thanks for being with us.
Hey, good to be here.